There we are. So now everyone is well aware that we will be recording this evening. So if you don't know me, many people do, some will not. It's Stephen Novosad from the CAD department at Nordic Canada, so Coach and Athlete Development. And also on this evening's call is Chris Manhart, head coach from Cross Country, British Columbia. And what we'd like to do this evening is to take a look at some perspective related to our delivery of community coaching. So even before we begin, as I've mentioned, we are recording this session and we will be posting this within our YouTube channel. So people who could not be here tonight will have the opportunity to go and visit. Unfortunately, we won't be able to answer questions in person if that's the case, and nonetheless, I think there could be some valuable material here as well. There's also a slide deck for anybody who will want that. We'll make that available. For questions, this is, unfortunately, this is in a webinar format, so we have limited interaction. However, if you look at the bottom of your screen of the window, you will have a Q&A tab. I would encourage anyone who wants to ask a question to type it into that box, and we will address that as we move along. We'll try and determine the pertinence with respect to individual slides as we're moving through this. We'll decide where it's best to answer those questions. Sometimes it'll be immediately, sometimes we will park that towards the end of the presentation. Before we begin though, I want everyone to understand this is not a mandatory training session, right? We really appreciate that people are here because of their interest and their commitment to skiing. And this is how I interpret this, that you want to see skiing grow and become better and more encompassing and more effective and developing young skiers throughout the country. So thank you for that. And thank you for tolerating me. I anticipate 30 minutes, between 30 and 45 minutes, and we should be finished for this evening. I would like you to know, nonetheless, that we are currently, let us move on now. I'm going to share my screen because I actually have a show prepared for you this evening. Here we are. And so what we really want to do tonight, above all, everyone on this call are learning facilitators, ostensibly, or related to the delivery of the community coaching context. What we'd really like to do this evening is share some insights with you and hopefully provide a bit of orientation and guidance on making our current delivery more effective by focusing in on some key messages that we can really hit home during our workshops. I'm going to move on here. What I'd like you to do before we get into deep is just provide you with a current status of the community coaching context. You may or may not be aware the community coach context is undergoing a review. So that's an internal review with Nordic Canada in association with the Coaching Association of Canada to bring it up to more contemporary needs. And these needs are going to be based on what we've identified as certain gaps or needs within the current system. So this has been in place for quite some time, and we have gathered feedback from across the country, from clubs, from divisions, from administrators, about what it might take to make this better. We've also experimented a bit running certain pilot projects and reaching out and getting a number of perspectives from across the nation. I hate to tell you this, but this is going to be somewhat of a monologue this evening, so I'll try not to bore any of you. I'll try to keep a bit of pitch in my voice and a little modulation. So what have we understood from the community coach is overall, there's been a high appreciation for the resources and the content. There's tons and tons of content. It's a brick. That the original resource manual is a brick, and it's meant as a resource tool. we don't want that, and we've learned, is we don't want that lend to the detraction of the core competencies coaches need to develop. In other words, what do they really need to know, and what do we have to focus in on to help us, one, keep kids skiing and keep kids progressing and develop that cross-country ski culture that becomes much more self-sustaining and evolving as we move ahead. One of the other things that has come about is our current context is a bit confusing. And that's what we'd like to really address in this meeting, is to try and tease out those key elements. So we distill those key messages and just sort of tease out those key elements that we want people really to need them to walk away with, an understanding of what it's going to take to help skiing. And I'm not talking just the skiers, I'm talking about skiing develop throughout the country. Before I move on, as we move ahead, feel free to type in those questions again. Chris, do you have anything you'd like to add here before I move on to the next, just in terms of introduction? I know we spoke of the importance of this base and the community coaching context, the introduction of skiing to kids. Is there anything you'd like to add at this point?
Nope, I think that's very clear.
All right, because this is the foundation. And if we get this right, we can not just, what do I say, perform in terms of the pleasure of cross-country skiing, but we can derive a heck of a lot more enjoyment out of all of this. So on we go. So I'd like to talk about the current recognized gaps that we are hoping to address really within this current session. So one of the things we looked at, and one of the things I've realized as I've traveled around, is it's really difficult for our coaches to clearly define, and these are our trained coaches following workshops and coaches who have even been coaching for a year or two or even more, but coaches can have trouble clearly defining what they're trying to achieve at the community coach. So I'd ask you as LFs, I'd ask you even as LFs, what is it that the community coach does in terms of developing a skier? And while it's not easy to answer that right now, if someone wants to even type it into the chat box, it's always fascinating. But a clear, concise message of what are we trying to achieve at the community coach level to allow these young skiers to get going. So a clear sense of what the purpose is, okay? Another thing is consistency. What do the standards look like? How good should a young skier be able to ski? How much fun should they be having within skiing? What is it that you want to develop for this? And this is not just to the community coach, by the way. This goes generalized across most contexts. And this is something that we want to be able to define, particularly as LFs. If as a learning facilitator, this is clear in your mind, that is great. And I am so appreciative for that. If there's any confusion, that's what we're going to try and address a little bit tonight, getting a concise sense of what we are trying to do, okay? Consistency, what it looks like, again, if we don't know what we're trying to do, it's going to be hard to be consistent. I'm going to jump down a little bit because one of the things that we're not doing is we're not just initiating kids to skiing, okay? We're not just entertaining kids once a week for skiing and playing games with them on skis. There are actually objectives that we want to achieve through skiing. I'm going to share a small anecdote. I had a young Russian skier join the club I was coaching and the group I was coaching. He was 8 years old and he could ski better than almost every one of our skiers in our club at that time, technically. And I thought that was stunning. And I'm not saying we train like the Russians, and I'm not even sure what that looks like. I have some insights. You know, we'll do it in our way. What I'm saying is the potential to ski really well and the basic principles that we want to achieve is definitely within our reach. Okay, and I think there's small tweaks that we can make or small areas of attention that we can make that can make a huge difference. And what do we want out of this difference? Well, I've said this, I've shared the statistics a number of times, but if we look at our SDP participation, the skill development program, the youth, the kids in the program, we have 100% turnover every 3 years. Of course, there's some kids that stick it out for 7 years and on and on and on, but there's a lot who are in it for 1 or 2 years. And one of the things as coaches, perhaps, is maybe we're not setting the groundwork. And I say this maybe. The coaches may not be setting the groundwork for continued development from the first level Jackrabbit right through the end of Jackrabbits, because that's what we're addressing through the community coach group. One of the things that has come across in my interactions with coaches and developing other coaches is we're not really familiar with all the resources that are out there. And there are a lot, and I understand the reality. Well, I hope I understand the reality. I can be challenged on that for sure. The reality of coaches who don't have a lot of time, a lot of volunteer coaches, parents who come in coaching. It's, you know, the workshops, the training workshops that we have is like drinking from a fire hose and trying to describe the taste. There's just so much in there. We're bombarded over and over that it's really hard to get stuff to stick. So one of the things this evening is I would like to really find a clear, direct, concise way of getting people familiar with the resources that will support them to, one, help the kids improve their skiing and make them better skiers and derive more pleasure themselves. I will move on. Chris, is there anything you'd like to add to this?
Just a question from Gord and Mark. There were the best practices that various clubs are using to achieve consistency. And Mark, one sec here, Mark. And then skiing is also to make it fun and develop basic skills. We're focused on small things and not the big picture. So, now,
yep, go ahead.
Those are two separate answers for sure. For best practices, various clubs are using to achieve consistency. I don't think any club really has I would say, the key to it right now. I think there is ebb and flow, and there's many reasons for ebb and flow, but there's definitely a few consistencies that the best clubs who are putting out, I would say, not necessarily the best skiers, but sometimes the most functional skiers are doing. And I think that has a lot to do with how good the program is that you're creating in the summer and winter and how well-rounded it is. I see a lot of and there's a lot of research on this in the last little while, that trying to do more focused work with these athletes where maybe we shouldn't be doing quite as much focused work to bring them in. I think we have to well-round them a little bit more and also not just focus on the aerobic systems. We should really be focusing on the technical systems as well. And that means that that's agility and speed and all these other things that go in with it, where we seem to be really focused on just, we need to run farther and run longer. And I think that is a really big mistake that a lot of these clubs are doing. They're really focused on the prize as opposed to how to get to the prize.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'd build on that as well from recent conversations. There are clubs that have programs that run at varying spans through the year. Some are limited to 6 to 8 weeks in a winter. I'm not saying that a club has to do anything, and I'm not into dogma either. There's no magic recipe. There is, however, the realization that we are limited in our resources, but following similar principles, hopefully, similar targets will hopefully optimize what you do have. This is not about laying guilt trips or saying it's not good enough. This is about taking what you have, the resources, and saying, okay, how are you making the best of this? Okay.
I think it's really easy for people to be happy with what they have. And I think that is one of the biggest mistakes of most of the coaches make nowadays is there can always be better. And I think people are very happy. They just get used to what's normal for them. And they don't look outside of what their little bubble is. And I think it's very, very easy to be happy with what you have. And that is a big mistake, I think, nowadays.
I agree. Thank you. That's hugely important. It's progression. And just Mark, to your comment earlier as well, fun, of course, fun is delivering. But I see fun at every level. Fun is meeting the capacity to receive and the challenge for the kids or the athletes that you're working with. So yes, this is always adapting, and understanding how to make things fun is specific to each context.
It's funny, I find the word fun, I don't particularly like the word fun, because I think it can be misconstrued in many ways. As you just mentioned, Stephen, it can be, fun could be about the passion of it. It can be about, I mean, there's so many ways to dictate fun. So I think that is a word that I don't particularly like, because it is too broad in the sense. I think we should define that word when we are actually discussing it. And that is for another time. But it also takes place a lot more in the next webinar we do, which is a little bit more focused parameters.
Yeah. So again, fun, perhaps the word, and this is just a little brain fart of my own, is think of engaging. What's engaging the senses? What's engaging the interest? What's engaging their progression, and structuring it that way. So where I have here is areas of address and key emphasis on workshops. Now, the fun, using the games, drills, challenges to the age appropriate activities is going to always be a fundamental thing. But let me just go down my list here, because what it comes down to is this is a wonderful time and a key time to get the basics of skiing in. We do speak of physical literacy all the time. We speak to this all the time. And we want kids to be active and across the board. But this is skiing nonetheless. And the kids are in this. And I think it's important to ask yourself, why skiing? What is the skiing going to give? And there are elements of this that if we can get right from the get-go, we have the backbones of every technique. And we have the scaffolding to build our techniques off of. So simplifying this, if we go into the reference manual, chapter 4 in the reference manual, I believe it's chapter 8 or 9 for classic and skate skiing, the checklists, these can be incredibly overwhelming. And really, where we wanted to break this down at this stage, the key elements of this stage, and Chris is going to present a little table to you later, I think captures this intimately, is there's 4 elements here. And you'll forgive us for the taxonomy here. The names aren't quite the same, but it's exactly the same concepts. The posture, balance on the ski, kick, and rhythm. Now, you might think we've pulled this out of a hat, but this is pretty broad. If we go to Europe, we find this across the board. If we go, the Norwegians, in fact, presented these exact words. One of the Norwegian coaches presented one of these exact words. Our national coach even uses these words. Now, again, I don't want to get hung up on this. Chris will be presenting the table. What's important, though, is to understand these 4 pieces is really what we want to see regardless of the technique we are teaching. So are the kids have good posture? Are they flexing? Are they flexing for all their major articulations? I'm not saying to bring these up particularly and bring attention and make it a cerebral or neurotic approach, but as a coach, what we want the coaches to understand are these 4 basic building blocks as they bring in each and every technique that they will go through within the SDP program. Chris, do you want to add anything here? I know this is a hot topic for you as well.
No, I think I agree. We're going to talk a little bit about it more soon, but I really agree that the athlete should be athletic. And to be athletic, you have to have the baseline, that posture. And that doesn't necessarily need to be just on skis, but it should be at all times. And I think it's really important that they demonstrate this in all their parts of life. And I think that is something that we also have to take away from this.
Yep. Thank you. Knowing the what. One of the things that always astounds me during my visits is most coaches have difficulty describing what are they trying to achieve in terms of progression, whether that be through a particular season or throughout the 4 years of the Jackrabbit program. So knowing this is very important. This is housed in step 4 within the reference manual. It's broken down into each of the benchmarks that that are listed there. But often coaches don't know where to find this, or that there is a progression laid out. Why is this important? Well, keeping kids in the game. Keeping kids in the game. So these principles of skiing, focusing when we're on the snow, knowing the what are those objectives, making sure that these elements are well achieved. The coaching resources, we'll get to that in a moment. There are a number of key coaching resources out there that we would like to help coaches, especially those with less time or less experience, continue in their own development so that they can be as effective as possible with the kids. Often coaches are walking away from their workshops without really knowing where the resources, what the resources are, the pertinence of it, and how to access them. A methodology for teaching techniques. So really what this is, coming back to tying this into the basic principles. There are a number of techniques that we have laid out within the program, and these are labeled with awards that kids receive annually for those using the SDP materials. And we will be teaching these techniques, but we have to come back and we can use these principles, these 4 principles, to evaluate their techniques as well. And these are what we're looking for this age. If we get these down, we're doing really well, okay? Effective use of activities. So when we're on snow, how are we helping the coaches understand how an activity is used to achieve our objectives? So when I speak to this is we have games, of course, but each game should be used or can be used. Again, should, I'm going to avoid should, horrible word. Too many connotations of guilt involved with that. But they can be used to bring out our objectives or to achieve our objectives or to provide progression. These activities, whether it be a game, a challenge, or a drill, can be applied and built upon progressively. And coaches walking away need to have that confidence, and something that we haven't been great at, but building the confidence. So during the sessions is putting some attention on doing this. Now the LFs might be asking right now, oh boy, okay, well, how do I do this? I have to know how to do this. Well, we're not there yet, to be frank with you. We're not there yet. What we're trying to do is create this awareness tonight and try and bring some attention. So really where this is helping you as LFs focus on certain elements and putting emphasis and importance to it. And the last one I would have here is the effective evaluation. How does the kids know that they're getting better? How do you know they're getting better? And I'm not saying make neurotic kids who are lining up like they would in school for an exam, but using the materials and effective ways for materials to keep them moving, not just throughout a season, but from year to year. One of the big reasons that I have come across that kids are not staying in the program over the long periods is because they're just not improving year to year, or they're just seeing the same thing over from year to year, that the programs are a bit stagnant and they're not progressing, they're not seeing it. Any questions at this point? Chris, anything to add here?
Yep. Paul, in the Q&A, Paul has a very good point, and this is one that we discussed actually on our call last week, just talking about the development of the learning facilitators, that commonly kids develop as quickly as the learning facilitator does, and if the learning facilitator doesn't teach very well or doesn't have good technique, it's really hard when the kids mimic them, especially if they're visual learners, it's very hard for them to actually learn the technique properly. And I think that is one of the things that we for sure realize is a gap in our system, is that we would like to push the technical side a little bit more for the coaching, and not just for the coaches, but for the learning facilitators as well, because I think this is an important part for everyone, is making sure that they actually really know how to ski. And how many people, and we'll see very shortly, but that the first thing that we need to look at is the ready position. Are you in a ready position, and do you have weight shift? Those are two things. And if those are the baseline of what cross-country skiing is, and if your coach does not know how to do those, it's very difficult for you to learn them if they cannot do it.
Definitely. And I would just add to that as well that an evaluation component for coaches is coming. And this is not a pass-fail. This is an awareness piece. So this is even something that we can begin as of this year. I know working with Ontario, this is a very key area of emphasis, of address that they would like to bring in. And this is coming in their review as well, but helping coaches understand skiing better. Definitely. Thank you for that. It's become a key component, and really it's beyond this, perhaps the scope of this tonight. We're talking about where we recruit our coaches. One of the things, we do not want to turn any coach away at this point. We want to help coaches improve. That is the fundamental element, becoming more effective, right? It's not creating stigma, it's creating an interest, and everyone likes improving. That I know. So delivery targets, the message here is, and these are messages that we think that is possible to deliver within the workshops with small tweaking as just an awareness as LFs. Again, I would correct, the LFs here are the ones coaching the coaches. We're creating the coaches, and we want the coaches to understand these elements so they can share them with the kids they work with. We need more time on skis. I'm going to click in on here. Oops. Oh no, not working. Oh, there. Oh, I got it. Phew. Sorry about that. Time on skis. Now, everyone in the workshop ostensibly sees this graph, and this can look intimidating. And I don't want to get into the nitty gritty of, hey, if you're not doing 40 sessions a year with 8 to 9-year-olds, you ain't going to get anywhere. That is not at all the case. But time on skis, we can argue, and Chris and I were having this conversation just beforehand, time on skis and active time, because it's not just time skiing. That's a technical element, but there's also a baseline development, physiological development for kids. We're not getting into training here, but we are creating foundations, active living. And so there are recommendations here. And what are these recommendations based on? I could honestly say they might be pretty arbitrary. They might be arbitrary. They might have been devised from best practices, certain studies of acquisition based in theoretical models. But the idea here is just to solicit the importance of, folks, get as many times in skiing as possible. If your week at fundamentals 8 to 9-year-olds is only 8 sessions, 1 to 1.5 hour sessions a winter, well, that's what you have right now. We are challenging coaches to think about how they can get more in, or how can you get the kids skiing more or more active. Maybe there's solicitation with parents, but this is going to be in each coach's or each club's wheelhouse, right? They know their people, they know the people that they're working with, they know their clientele, and the kids that they're developing. But just getting this sense, better skiing is going to come from better quality time on skis. Chris, do you want to add to that? I know you definitely have a sense of this one as well.
Yes, I've seen this a lot in the last while, is that not all practices are considered equal, where I see a lot of kids spending, maybe they do only have 8 a year, they spend a lot of time standing around in that time. And I think it's very important to make sure when you're only having that many practices that they are moving at every second to really get what you can out of that hour and a half. And lecturing kids for long periods and making them wait for the slowest cog in the wheel is not effective use of this style of learning. So I think it's really important to set the stage very well when you're teaching, how you teach a flawless practice and going over it so they do not sit still and still are more or less activated by what you're teaching them. I think is so important in this stage.
Thank you. And yeah, and making the most of the time you have. There might be other strategies as well, and I will invite some comments afterwards. This is synopsis. Overall, let's just understand we're preparing the kids for the next level, next developmental context. Some will continue in the program, some won't. Some will take off with their parents, and the parents will decide that's enough, we got what we need. But if the kids are loving it and progressing, the parents love it and see the kids progressing, we're preparing for the next development, even if it's not within our programs. Seriously, it's not even necessarily just around skiing. We're developing that next level overall. Kids, we've talked about these other elements. I will move on because this is delivery strategies and getting the message to our coaches during the workshops. So there are 4 pieces that I've put in here. Make sure the coaches are aware of the resources. Coaches don't know one of the things that there are coach plans. There's 90 pages of coach plans for every permutation of lesson in the Jackrabbit context. Okay. This is really key. Coaches need to understand where that is. I've had coaches encountered coaches who have been coaching for years and they are not even aware. Please make sure they know that chapter 5 in the reference material is available to them. It's the plug and play for the coach who has 10 minutes before a session and they need something to do. I've had coaches say, oh, it'd be so great if we had plans for every lesson. They are there, but we've done a not so great job at having them aware there. I'm not saying go through every one of them, but find the way to make that an emphasis. The Jackrabbit Skills Benchmark. These are listed in step 4 of the research material. Understand that each level of the Jackrabbit program has certain benchmarks. That is not to restrict anybody to the benchmarks. It's not necessarily to teach to those specific benchmarks. Those are marks of progression and what we should be aiming to in terms of what decent looks like, or what they should, we hope that a progression looks like from year to year. The Athlete Development Matrix. We are currently undergoing a long-term development update. Our original LTD model for Nordic Canada that we're using is 1.2. We're currently, Sport for Life is at 3.0. You will be seeing updates and we'll be updating to a much more functional and complete athlete development matrix. And I'm going to solicit some of your interests and at the end of this session. But the athlete development matrix available through the Nordic Canada website, make sure the coaches know, because there are videos there that will help the novice coach create their image of what kids, what they're trying to bring the kids to look like. Okay, this is important. I think people have a great deal of creativity to achieve what they understand. That's creativity is manifest through challenge, but you have to have that image to begin with. And again, Chris is going to present a tool right away that BC has developed and uses that will be progressively integrated into this program. The Nordic Ski Lab, formerly Cross Country Ski Nation, is a huge collection of technical videos, perhaps more for the actual coaches' development, their personal development, understanding of skiing. But they also have a huge series of games and explanations of how we apply these games. So this is another wonderful resource that please help coaches out with introducing this in their in your workshops. These are 4 key pieces to go and get. Okay, making the links, another delivery strategy that's so important when we're on the snow, and even presenting games, activities, drills. A section, find ways to spend the time on snow and make the link between what are the objectives and how we are using these drills. You don't have to share that necessarily with the kids at this age, but the coach we want the coaches to understand what they're moving towards, having a clear sense of what the end of season looks like for these kids, keeping them in skiing because they got better, they had a heck of a lot of fun, that we chose great activities that were engaging for them, that they had fun doing. Now, of course, that is up to us as LFs during workshops to ensure that we make those links and provide that toolbox for coaches. They are desperate for this toolbox. And I bring us back to the Nordic Ski Lab. This is an expanding toolbox of activities and drills. Over time, there'll be more. The Athlete Development Matrix has the youth-specific videos that will be updated as the matrix gets, as our LTD review progresses. Now, for the technical skills, keeping this simplified. Again, I've mentioned it before, and this is a little bit redundant throughout the show this evening, folks. The technical skills, we're coming back to these baselines, these four, I call these 4 pillars, 4 principles is probably more appropriate. I'm going to bring this up and I'm going to let Chris explain this one, but the different techniques, whether it be diagonal stride, whether it be 1 skate, 2 skate, whether it be 1 kick, double pull, or double pulling, they all stem from these 4 elements that are listed here. And I think it's so important not to become neurotic perfectionists with every angle of flexion in a technique, but to hit these elements within those techniques. And I'm going to make a reference to the cowboy skate skier. We see a lot of cowboy skate skiing throughout many jackrabbit programs. We want to try and bring these kids where they're not the cowboy, they're not sitting back, they're actually moving and in balance on 1 ski to another, transferring from 1 ski to another. And these is all based on the effective application of these principles. I'm pulling up the slide here. Chris, would you like to speak to this now?
Yep.
Or anything else I said, of course.
That's good. And Donna, that's a very good point. I think that was to do with the point of how much time, how many sessions they have and how much time on snow. I believe that's what you were referring to, as the program does become long if you really end up putting all those sessions in. So I believe it's a little bit up to the parents to also fill in those gaps, not just up to the coaching and the club philosophy.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay, so there's one correction on here that I actually had made already, but I didn't send the right one. But the U20, U23, the U20 is also in the yellow, the speed adaptation. That is also a U20, U23 split. So I won't take complete credit for this. Nordic Canada, they are slowly working on a very similar idea to this. We're just a little faster at it. Now it's very simple. The basic techniques is really what we're focusing on, and it works in the timing, weight transfer, and body position. Before you can go to the B's, you have to go through all the A's. So if you do not pass the A's, you cannot go to the B's. And it's very interesting. We have been working with this. So I created this in the winter, and we have been implementing this for the provincial teams this year. And I already can see that it's really hard to measure technique. And this is one of the first times we've been able to measure technique. So the ready position is pretty straightforward. In all techniques, there is a ready position. And there's a little red note tab in there. It actually explains what the ready position is. So when you click on it, it actually gives you exactly what it is. But in diagonal stride, it's where the hands or the legs are together just as they pass each other, and the arms are just in front of the hips. And in this ready position, a lot of people, I think, even on the provincial teams, I think this is pretty good, but not everyone on the provincial teams. This includes like the actual provincial team, not the subcategories of the development squads or the talent squads and such like that. But what we see is a really big problem is the 1 ski, the weight transfer from 1 ski to the other ski. This is where I would say 99% of our athletes already cannot make it by this section. And I'm not just talking 12-year-olds, I'm talking 15 and 16-year-olds. And I think this is something that we really have to push in the this phase, the younger phase, is making sure that they have very good weight transfer at that age. And this is not weight transfer. Everyone always automatically thinks is diagonal stride, but this is offset. This is one skate. This is all the techniques. And this is where we see it fall apart, because everyone has, I mean, a lot of people have quite good technique in diagonal stride where they do transfer their weight. But when you look at offset, I would say it's a very, very small margin. I'm sure under 1% that actually has a true weight shift when they climb. And so I think it's really important that this is really focused on in your positions where that learning facilitator positions in community coaching. And the last one is coordination. Now I'll explain coordination a little bit more. It's mostly the timing, making sure that the poles land at the same time, and making sure that you can do the technique with no poles on the left side if you're skating and on the right side. So if you're offset, it should be on both without poles. Diagonal stride, it should be without poles. You should be able to do the technique above. That means weight transfer coming through a proper ready position. And you should be able to do it without poles at any grade that is necessary for you to achieve this fundamental movement pattern. So I think this is the things right now, just those three alone, I would be, I mean, under 15 years old, there's only a very, very small amount of people that can actually pass this, because I don't think right now in Canada, we're out of position that we can say that we can even move to the Bs at this stage. And I'm hoping that this is something that will really resonate with the learning facilitators, that this is something that we really need to focus on, the priority, making sure we don't jump ahead to the glide phase when we're not even good at the ready position. It's very easy to jump phases here. And we're really focusing on making sure we don't jump the phases and making sure we go at one thing at the next, because that is the phases that we see are the problem, and they're really coming to bite us a little bit later in the progression. And we're having to step back a long ways when they get to that 18 years old, 19 years old, when they haven't really completely mastered this, this fundamental. When you look at it here, the way I set it up was the striding. If you don't get a 4 out of 5, you can't progress to the next one. If you're at 3, you don't move on to coordination until you get a 4 in one ski weight transfer. So that's how this this is set up. So you actually, as you move through, you can start on any single different one of them, because they're all different techniques. But unless you get a 4, you cannot progress onto the next one. And the ones below it in the practical execution, that is something that I think that it's a little bit more coach based, but it's something that you need to be taught as well. And it's also something that I don't think at this stage we need to worry about, but at the next talk that we're going to give in a little while, that's a little bit more the focus of the pacing and the transitions and adjusting to conditions. Right now, we're just focusing on the A's of the basic technique, and the IMUs, don't worry about that, because that's the next level.
Thanks, Chris. And I'm going to bring, and this is wonderful, so thank you. And Gord, will this checklist be made available? We will, BC has agreed to share the pertinent part with everyone who might be interested as well. Again, if I come back to our principles, body position, weight transfer, so body position, balance, timing, those are the words, rhythm, those are the words I used. These are the words that BC has used. They are the same principles. I assume you agree with that, Chris.
Yes, we actually talked about quite a lot about this. I actually put together a coaching panel just to discuss these terms. The other terms are very Norwegian, and that is why we actually changed them a little bit, because our common language that we use here is much more to this. So we actually switched them a little bit so we could actually make it more Canadian in just the understanding and also the history of where we brought it. That is the reason I actually changed it. So they are absolutely the same.
Thank you. Okay. So yes, Gord, that will be available. I would just like to speak to a couple more comments. Mark, you said there's a huge difference in what people and clubs think kids skiing is, and CC workshops are not enough. There needs to be an education for the boards, management, and clubs and divisions also. I agree 100% with you. There is a SDP coordinator webinar we did last year that was meant to be shared with, you can find it on the website. It was meant to be shared with the boards and to draw everybody in. about what a program is. Right now, the reality is, as we know, a lot of people doing the CC course are parents, or they are young, they're teenagers quite often, young adults, who may not have the influence in a club to make a lot of these things happen. They are dealing with the reality of time. So Donna, you were talking about time and reality. Again, this is making the best and making sure we hit the messages that really matter right now. The fun is always going to be part of it, or the engagement. The games are always going to be part of it, but with intention and I'd say deliberately used. Maybe surreptitiously. You don't have to share why we're doing that necessarily with the kids, but we're using that, we're creating that environment. But these are the messages for coaches to hold in mind as we move forward. Jerry, I agree, technique is important. Spend quite a bit of time on that during the CC workshop that I have led, a little more than LF materials indicate. I would definitely say kudos because this is a key element. And if we're going to fudge, because we know we can't get through everything necessarily in an effective workshop, that what we're saying is put the emphasis here for the time being. Chris, do you want to challenge me on that one, or is that?
No, I think that's great.
Yeah. Always at all levels, tell coaches to keep the ratio for time skiing versus time standing still. You betcha. Mark can't emphasize that more. And this is a point within the workshops that's when you're introducing the games and the integration of activities and drills, when you're on snow, this is a great time as an LF to make those points and bring that home. Good planning is also a huge element, but let's talk about our delivery challenges here because I'm running out of time. I've already exceeded. I'm sorry if anybody has to run. We lack homogeneity in delivery. Time on skis is only that. It's recommended. If you have 8 weeks, do the best with it. This is a summary of what we've said. It doesn't change the objectives, only how far we might get with those objectives. And if you got something that's getting everybody there in record time, oh, how great. Please share it with us. And how can you motivate the kids to get on skis more and of their own volition and the parent partnership? One of the things, and I throw this out there, it's to challenge coaches. How do you engage the parent? This is something, but if we're going to engage the parent, make sure they're doing effective skiing. Make sure they're doing quality skiing with their kids and they understand what the kids need. So again, this is a point to emphasize with the coaches that you are developing. Going for a 3-hour walk on skis behind their parents might not be developing the broad, comprehensive aspects of skiing and enjoyment of skiing that we're hoping for. So getting that message across. Okay, overall, our lack of ski ability and knowledge. So again, during the workshops, you will see the participants during your workshops, the developing coaches skiing. It's not a question of creating stigma. It's, can we recommend pathways for their development? How do we share that passion, get them enthused to make their skiing better? I know that that sounds almost trite, but give them definitive paths. Is there a workshop within a clubs that are being offered? Have coaches consider these things. How much are they investing in their own time to get skiing better? Over time, as we get better and better skiers and the culture improves throughout Canada, the ideal would be that we recruit those who are stronger to be coaching. Because as it was said earlier, kids will ski like their coaches. So if we have good models and other good skiers around them, it's self-perpetuating. Lack of time and engagement. Again, I come back to the coaches who said to me, oh, wouldn't it be great to have lesson plans? Get to know the available resources. At least optimize what is there. I mean, we will continue to endeavor to make it better, but let's make sure they know what is there and that they can walk away with that. Okay? And make sure they can answer, what am I trying to achieve this season? And that bigger picture. So working from the big to the small, those small steps. If I might hear Donna, one element that I think is weak in the CC course is the understanding of the progression of a skill within a level. What what they teach first and how is that going to affect the skill down the road? Yep, I agree. The layout nonetheless, it might be bigger than this question this evening, but it's a great challenge to LFs. Ostensibly, we represent the coaching knowledge, the coaching wisdom in Canada. So I would throw this out there for community resolution to a degree. Chris, do you want to weigh in on that or anything else before we wrap up?
You know, I am hoping that I find that every time we discuss this at all levels, I don't think it's necessarily just the CC. I think it's a really like sort of predominant question that you see in all the levels is there a progressive, like a really easy progressive layout of the skill? And I agree that it is not clear. And usually it is how good the facilitator is what, how good the actual, the information that you get is. So there's nothing on paper. And funny enough, this technical breakdown, which I showed a few minutes ago, that is the first progression that we have made that we're all on the same page. That's the first stage. And we're hoping to put a video links to it. So for instance, at the community coach, say you break down diagonal stride one cycle, which is like right foot, gliding on right foot to circle around to gliding again on the right foot. There's maybe takes 10 frames, if you slow down frames, of essential things that you want to see in that technique. We're hoping that we will have, for this stage, we'll have 2 of those frames that you'll be able to look at for community coaching. You'll say, okay, these are the 2 true takeaways. And then we can explain those, because what's the problem is everyone says, well, glide is really important, but everyone's philosophy of what glide is a little bit different from east to west. So it's really hard to pin it down. So our goal is with this layout is that we're really going to hammer it down a little bit more. And it's always been a pet peeve of mine as well, is that is very loose across the country. And I'm hoping that in a year or so, and it probably will take a year, because it's not just that alone is to come up with that, trying to get the same language across the board was fairly difficult to begin with. And I believe that once we add video to it and explain each phase, I think it can be very, very successful to what your question is making sure that why is there none and how do we address it? I think those are both valid questions.
And I would put that in the parking lot. I'm sorry, I can't provide greater solace at the moment, but within the year, that is where we definitely hope to go with that whole review as well. So it looks like time, I'm overextending my time, folks. What I would like to know nonetheless, I would bring you back to the messages here. Come back to those key areas of address, putting focus on that in the meantime. Sorry. Oh, I've lost it here. Anyways, putting the key focus in the meantime, and oops, oh my gosh, I lost it all. Okay, so be it. What I would like nonetheless is, I'm just going to pull up my final slide here because I'm asking for, well, oh boy, everything's freezing up for some reason. Here we are. What do you need? So new resources, LFs, we're sourcing right now. What could you want over time? Whether this be video supports, the clinics, workshops, training. How do we get this forward? With the review, we can anticipate a more formalized update for LFs next year to take this forward in a new context and approach forward as we can. Don't know what that's going to look like yet, but we will keep you apprised of that as that builds. So videos, thinking about clinics, workshops, or training that can lend to improving the understanding of technique and making our coaches better skiers, making our LFs better understand each of these concepts. Let me know. Guidance. We can work with the LFs, we can work with divisions, we can work with clubs, helping you to get those elements into place. Ideas you can send to either Ilona or myself. These are our email addresses, also available on the website, through our website. I'm just going to pull up. Are there any more questions here? No. Before you leave this evening, Matrix, sorry, I'm just looking, Jerry. Matrix resources are for very high level youth skiers. The progression is not for the very beginner skiers and does not show the commonest mistakes at the younger levels, unless I've missed those resources myself. Quite likely, Jerry, but at the same time, what we're bringing dialing this back down to now, and I agree, these will require updating. Nonetheless, we're dialing it back to those principles. If we can stick with those principles again, I think that we have the best basis for the improvement, and we will endeavor to pull out some examples or some resources in that respect in the near future. Before you check out tonight, folks, for any LF coach who wants a PD point, please type in, as you exit, type in your NCCP number into the chat box, and we'll be sure to give you your PD point. If there's no other questions, any comments, there's no formal survey on here. However, I am always curious to receive input and understand the appreciation value that this may have brought, what we can do in the future, what you would like to see. Feel free to send it to my email, and I will be more than happy to look through those and take these considerations to go forward. I see there's one last question. Paul, okay, I'll scribble that down. So folks, I'm going to end it here, stopping recording. Thank you so much for coming out this evening, and I hope we get further along that path. Chris, anything you'd like to share to finish up here?
Nope, that's fantastic.
Thank you so much for joining me this evening. I really appreciate that, and I think there were some wonderful insights as well. So thanks, folks, and hey, good training. Hope to see you soon. So long.